Agriculture is a capital intensive business, hence the need for farmers to get access to finance. And that's what we as a bank do. We lend to farmers. Farmers borrow from us to do the expansions, to purchase new farms, new land, do further capital expansions on their business. And that's what we do. We finance primarily farmers. And we have a substantial exposure in the farming industry, which we're very proud of. We do have a lending book currently of about 16 billion rand. That's our total exposure in the industry, which is substantial, but it's also a very solid and clean book, and we're very proud to bank those customers.
When you say it's a very solid and clean book, obviously farming is a risk venture. I mean, if we look around us as we are here in the Free State at the moment and look at the mealie crop and the drought situation, and you call it a clean book, the farmer often has to come to you for help.
Yes, there's a lot of risk mitigants in the industry. If you firstly look at the grain industry, you need to manage your production risk, you need to manage your price risk. And the bank do have those sort of risk mitigants to mitigate the risk for the farmer and also mitigate the risk for the bank. So through the necessary crop insurance, we cover the farmers. Farmers are also being covered through price hedging and sort of price risk mitigant tools, and that's the way that we manage the risk on behalf of the farmer. And I think we're also taking bonds over the land. The farmers are usually asset quite rich, and I think that's also one of the reasons why our write-offs are so low, is the fact that we are fully secured in many cases. And if there's ever a problem with a farmer, and farmers go through cycles and through problems, we see it that the number of farmers in the country have declined. They've become less, but the farmers are becoming bigger. So what's happening with a troublesome farmer, a farmer that maybe hit a drought for a year or two, that can't survive, that the next door neighbor take him over, and that farmer becomes our customer, and we're financing a farmer on bigger scale, and we're making sure that we as a bank provide also the products to ensure a sustainable farm out there.
The aspirant black farmer has an enormous problem now because he cannot get into these large farms. He cannot get at this great capital funding. How does the bank, from Standard Bank's point of view, help that aspirant black farmer?
Well, we look at short-term and medium-term financing solutions for the black commercial farmers. I think what is key is that the farmer who wants to produce grain needs to have access to land, and with access to land he needs to have access to the production capability, which talks to the mechanization.
But if I could just interrupt you there, access to land is all very well, but you've got tribal land, which creates a problem, and then you've got land tenure, which it creates another problem. How does that poor man ever get land in his name in order to give the bank, as Willie just said, an asset to lend him money for farming?
Look, we, from a short-term financing point of view, when we talk production input financing, we're saying if you have access to land, even if you're in a communal area, you have access to that land through either a lease agreement or a permission to occupy, sort of documentation that gives you permission to operate in that land. Now, with that, we are able to finance you for production input, where you can repay that, at the end of the harvest. Now, on land reform lands or farms, which gives you an access to that farm over a period of 5 to 10 years, we can finance you for production input as well. There are two key aspects that you need to look at there. One is the management capability, and that should come in the form of a track record, which is better reflected by financials. Now, where there's no adequate track record being reflected, then we say there must be a business development support service provider. It can be in the form of a coach or a mentor or someone who's going to assist you with regards to the three aspects, which is, the business strategy, the technical aspects, as well as the business aspects. And within the business aspects, there's a financial management component to it. Now, when these relationships are formed, they need to be formed independently, and there needs to be formalized in the form of an agreement that stipulates the roles and responsibilities of each party during the production period.
I'm going to throw this one at both of you. I hear all these technicalities and I hear all the possibilities, but now let's deal with the reality of the situation. You have, without being rude, not a very well educated man, but he's a brilliant farmer. But he knows nothing about keeping books or business plans. What does the bank do to help him?
Well, from a business development
I
support
see
point
Willie
of
smiling at that
Yeah.
one because
I think there's two ways to go about it. One is through the BDS or the business development support that's going to help him to keep the books. But secondly, we have a brilliant product called BizLaunch. Now, BizLaunch being an ideal product for a startup business. It helps him with a pastel, online, which essentially gives you an opportunity to be able to keep proper books, and which you can then work through with your bookkeeper to make sure that you are able to produce the financials at the end of the year. But secondly, I think it's important that we bring in the issue of succession planning, that we need, that farmer's son or daughter to start getting involved in the farming business so that, they can come with education, which is the theoretical part, and match this with the practical aspect of the experience that the dad has, in farming, and that can lead to success.
So you're really, if I look at you, the bank is acting as a mentor in a lot of ways in this area,
Yes.
as opposed to the commercial established large farmer.
Yes.
But it's in your interest to create these farmers that are coming through. The government is hell-bent and absolutely determined via the minister, because she's made it quite clear to me to create, and so people like Jay Naidu, ex-Unionist guys, are hell-bent on creating these smaller farms. So should the banks not go along with this story? They're actually bucking the government's stream. They're going against the stream. So you're pushed into a kind of corner in some respects, aren't you?
Yeah, sure. The establishment of emerging farmer, either a black farmer or a white farmer, it is a challenge. We just spoke about economics of scale. Now we're thinking differently around establishment of a small farmer, which is forming on small scale. What is the sustainability and the survival of that farmer? But I think any country, if you're not into the development of smallholder farmers, it's the wrong model. It's the wrong thing to do. And we are, as a bank, has put forward a specific strategy to work with specific partners in the private sector and also with government out there to make sure how we establish sustainable good farmers. We have good models out there. We've got successes out there to say this is what we've done, this is what we think how it works, and then we as a bank are not maybe always directly fulfilling a mentorship role. Yes, we do a role through our agricultural experts and specialists to provide some financial and technical advice, but we also linked up with the Centre for Agribusiness Leadership and Business Development down at Stellenbosch, where we have the centre which focuses on the accreditation of BDS, Business Development Support, as Diale rightly said, to make sure that those guys are being accredited, they are fully trained, they know what's the bank's expectation, what's government's expectation, what's the customer's expectation. You bring all of those together to make sure that they do support this emerging farmer in his venture, and that's where the successes come from.
Here's another idea for you to consider that I don't know whether anybody has thought. There are many young men that are uneducated leaving school and they've got no hope of getting a job. Why could we not do again by taking a leaf out of World War II and the British, when all the men went off to fight and all the women ended up in the land army or the land corps, tilling the land and milking cows, and everybody laughed and said it could never work, and it was so successful. They fed themselves during a war, an island. Now, why can't we set up these little corps, the land corps, youngsters that can't get jobs, put them in there, sponsored by both government and business, so it's a coordinated affair, and teach some of these people how to work the land, which is our most important factor. If we're looking at food preservation, food survival, and the future growth of this country, which by 2040 is going to be double the amount of food we need today. Is this not a point?
It is a good point. I think those co-ops. In fact, in small scale production, you need to have those co-ops, but they need to be run on commercial principles. In other words, you need to have the private sector running the co-ops in order for them to be run, on commercial basis, because you need to have the efficiencies built in there.
But then you're saying now this all lays in the hands. You're leaving yourself very open on this one, because you're really saying it people like yourselves, the bankers and other people, it's private enterprise that must do this, not government. The government would love for you to say that, I'm sure. It takes a responsibility away a little bit.
I think the government has a role to play, which is to create an enabling environment, so and also to provide, some of the input in an entity such as that one. But I think that it will run better, when it's privately driven.
But I think there's also coordination required, also working with other role players, potential off-takers, input suppliers. So it's almost, again, a public-private partnership. And I think the way to look at that, the National Development Plan is quite clear on a focus and energy also on land reform around district level. And I think these things should be developed on a district level, where we bring together role players. And that should happen without people being forced to come together, but on district level, where commercial farmers, emerging or smallholder farmers and government partner together there to say, how can we establish, how can we create jobs, how can we get people, more smallholder farmers, access to land. And I think that's the role model and the model that we should follow within district level. Look at opportunities across the land, because it also differs from province to province and industry to industry. But I think that's the way to go.
Diale, do you agree? Do you think we're heading towards the right goal together?
Well, I think we can do more and we can do better. We certainly, have the vision to reach a certain point, but I think there needs to be improvement in terms of, some of the efficiencies around certain programs, and I think as a bank we've reached out to the entire value chain to say, this is what we want to do. We want to be the leading bank in agricultural transformation, and I think we're moving, towards that direction. And I think there has been some successes in terms of the work that we've done in the past with regards to lending as well as transactional, propositions. And I think, by 2015, we will get there in terms of our strategy.